Mr. Martin Griffiths, Secretary General, Special Envoy to Yemen, welcome to Al Arabiya, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. We understand that you draw a very close link between finding a political solution and fixing the economy. Do you believe fixing the economy is now the most important priority? And are you in Washington, D.C. this week working on trying to fix the Yemeni economy?
I think fixing the economy is a priority in the context of the peril that Yemen now faces of famine. And as you know, yesterday in the UN Security Council in New York, Mark Lowcock for the United Nations spoke, I think, passionately about the fears that we all have of famine coming to Yemen and making the situation impossibly more difficult, impossibly more tragic. So, and the economy has a critical role to play in either negatively causing that or helping to cause that famine, or constructively helping to helping us all to prevent it or to limit it or mitigate it. So the economy for me is an immediate issue of great priority. It doesn't compete with the political issue. It's separate, but it's imperative. And my message here in Washington is partly that we must now hasten our efforts to avert the threat of famine, as we have just been discussing, but also to say, look, in all this darkness that the people of Yemen face, there is a story of hope. And my job, as you and I have discussed before, is to bring that message of hope. And what I'm saying to officials here at the very senior level is, you have to help me get talks, engagement, consultations restarted on the political solution. And I'd like to do that and get the parties together in the course of the next month to do that. That's the message of hope for Yemen. Political settlement is a positive hope, and I'm asking the US government to continue the support that they always give to this message, and to understand where I am coming and where I think we need to go.
The Secretary General was in Washington this week. Did he come to meet with you, and did you meet him, and was he a part of your efforts to convince the doubters that the talks can be rekindled and then we can go forward in Yemen?
Now, the Secretary General is very passionate, as again you and I have discussed before, about how to resolve the conflict in Yemen. He has a personal experience from his time as the High Commissioner for Refugees in the humanitarian issues, which are now taking front and center on Yemen. So this gives him a renewed vigor and commitment, I think, to assist these efforts. My job here is, in addition and complementary to his very top-level efforts, is to say, okay, we want a solution in Yemen, we want the talks, here are the things that we need to do today to get there.
Talking about humanitarian, it's indeed right front and center. Mark Lowcock spoke to the Security Council on Tuesday this week, and he mentioned that 40 million people in Yemen now, it's not 11 anymore, are in need of humanitarian assistance to survive because of food insecurity and acute malnutrition and mortality ratios. The picture of the humanitarian situation is very bleak indeed. And he put 5 criteria or areas he would like to see implemented to help. First of all, I'm sure you've heard them and you know them well. First of all, cessation of hostilities in or all around the infrastructure and facilities for aid operations. 2, production of food, protection of food and essential good supplies. 3, larger and faster injection of foreign exchange into the economy through the central bank. And 4, increased funding and support for humanitarian operation. And 5, call for full re-engagement with the Special Envoy, yourself, sir, to end the conflict. Now, you didn't ask for cessation of hostilities, which is number 1. Your thoughts on the subject, sir?
I think Mark has set out, as he always does, as a tremendous ambassador for the humanitarian issues. He set out a very clear menu of things which are required. And as you said, the cessation of hostilities came as his first priority. But he was very specific. He wasn't, although we must all hope for a general cessation of hostilities, I'm not sure that's on offer at the moment, but he asked for specific stop the fighting around areas where humanitarian operations are ongoing, where the supplies need to come through. I think that's very practical, that's very measured, and if we can achieve that, that would be great. For example, and it's only one of the places which I think he was referring to, let's make sure that in Hodeidah, the humanitarian pipeline, the trucks coming off taking the goods out of the port to feed the people in the rest of the country, that these trucks are able to get through easily and quickly. I think that's practical, that's purely humanitarian. I think he's right to ask for that. But the fact that he's needing to make this very broad appeal tells us something very serious. It tells us, as is always the case with the potential for famine, famine is a complex, difficult, and virtually uncontrollable phenomenon, because it is caused not just by a lack of supplies of goods and food and fuel, but it's also caused, as you have said, as he said yesterday, emphasized yesterday, by, for example, the massive depreciation that we've seen in particularly these last couple of months of the currency, of the rial. Food is so much more expensive that even where it exists, people can't afford it and will starve while food is available in the market. That's where famine has a special insult to the human condition. So I think Mark is right to say there is a package, not a menu, a package of measures which need to be done. I'm number 5 there because, of course, I think we all agree that a political solution is the sustainable response to the humanitarian situation, but that there are things that need to be done now. My call in reinforcement of what he's saying is, let us not make these issues political. There's a conflict going on, we'll try and settle it, but let's deal with the issues of famine in a non-political way. We're trying, as you know, to bring the parties together, not as representatives of the government of Yemen or Ansar Allah, but as people concerned to make the Central Bank of Yemen effective, efficient, responsive to need. We're trying to get these people together. We've been doing this for a couple of months. We hope that we can do it in the next 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be interesting because it'll be the first time there's a genuine cross-party lines response to a major issue.
Saudi Arabia has provided 200 million this month as a deposit in the Central Bank of Yemen, on top of area deposit of $3 billion in total, in effort to bolster the currency, the rial, which you spoke about. The rial used to be 200 to the dollar a year ago. Now it's 700 to the dollar, and the inflation is gone wild. And actually, inflation could be a weapon of mass destruction in Yemen. But can we, or should we, always rely on Saudi generosity? Some say no, a Marshall Plan is needed for Yemen to recover. Do you agree?
Well, I do agree. I think it's remarkably good that the Saudi government did that very quickly, by the way. When there was a call for injecting cash into the economy, the Saudis stepped forward with 200 million. That's a lot of money, and anybody's money, and that was most welcome. I'm also very encouraged by the news, I think we were hearing yesterday, that the Emirates is coming forward to pay salaries of some of the civil servants, the teachers, I think. This is phenomenally welcome. It is welcome by any standards in humanitarian terms. But I think you're right. I think it's an international community which needs to respond globally to this problem that we're facing of the economy, because it's in dire straits, as you've been saying. It's great that the Saudis are leading the charge in this, and we must give them all the credit they deserve for that. I hope that they will also lead the charge with me on political issues, as I think they will. But I think the response to the currency problem as Mark Lowcock said yesterday, it's an international issue now. Famine will destabilize Yemen as well as kill Yemenis. Destabilizing Yemen is a threat to international peace and security. Stopping the famine is an international priority.
Actually, the $70 million this week donated jointly by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are to pay the salaries of 135,000 teachers all over Yemen, which is really good news for us. But I would like to move here now to the new government of Dr. Mouin Abdel Malik, which took place. He was a replacement to Ahmed bin Dagher, the former prime minister who is now referred to investigation. You welcomed the appointment of Mouin Abdel Malik by Twitter in your account, and you describe him as professional. Do you expect him to call for a meeting of donors to work on creating a Marshall Plan for Yemen?
As you say, I was very, very encouraged by the appointment of Mouin Abdel Malik, and I said so publicly, but I also had a very good discussion with him directly, and my colleague Moin Shrein met him in Riyadh a couple of days ago. I hope to go and see him in Aden soon. He's very good news. Here's a man who is young, is active, he's incredibly energetic. As Minister for Public Works, he, in the middle of war, was actively engaged in rebuilding infrastructure for the benefit of Yemenis. He's a great choice. And I know that his overwhelming priority is to make the government services work for the people of Yemen. We must all support that. I wouldn't want to give him instructions as to how he would approach the international community. All I would say is that his appointment is a message to the international community that there is somebody here they can seriously get around and support.
I would like to move now to the shuttle diplomacy you've been conducting. Since last time we met and we talked to each other here in New York, around this time, a month ago, you have been engaged in shuttle diplomacy that included capitals in the Gulf and around the world. Can you tell us and our viewers, has these talks produced tangible results so far that give you optimism for the future?
My mandate primarily is to bring the parties together to engage on measures which will resolve the conflict and satisfy the needs both of the people of Yemen, neighboring states, the international community. In a way, it's a simple mandate. Now, I hope very soon to be able to announce a restart of those consultations. I'd like to see them happening in November. We have a couple of options in Europe as venues for those consultations. I'm hopeful that, and I say this because of course I've been discussing this in detail, as you point out, with all the actors involved, including the government of Yemen, President Hadi, as well as in Sana'a and the coalition. I hope that those consultations will now focus on substance, on the framework that you may recall. I put the elements to the Security Council on the 18th of June. We've been updating that document, and I hope it sets out the elements of the eventual solution. And I want to, on the basis of these discussions, put that on the table, the agenda for the next consultations. So I'm moving forward. We've got some logistical issues to resolve, but with goodwill and in the context of the crisis in Yemen, I think we will make it.
I'm very glad that you are moving ahead with the plans to hold direct or indirect talks between the parties, regardless of the place, whether it's Kuwait, Oman, Geneva, Vienna, or even Nairobi. And they will be the first talks since Kuwait talks in 2016. And you seem to have assurances that the Houthis will attend this time and there will not be last-minute demands. Is that the case?
I hope and think and believe and plan that going into these next round of consultations, there will be no surprises in terms of logistics or non-attendance. I'm sure this will take place. I've had a whole range of discussions with the Ansar Allah leadership on this. I know they're committed to come, and I have to resolve one or two logistical issues to make sure that the way in which they do come is considered safe by them and they have the right to have that consideration and respect for their anxieties about their travel, for example. So I think we're going to sort that out. But as you say, the point I want to make here is this. Bringing the parties together after 2 years is never going to be simple. A war of this kind, a conflict of this kind in Yemen breeds hatred and lack of confidence. Bringing them together, in contrast, is finally a story of hope for the people of Yemen, who are so oppressed by the situation, now by the prospect of famine. My job is to sort of shine a light, if you like, to see that there is a tunnel, as the saying goes, and at the end of the tunnel there may be peace in Yemen. That's what I hope to begin to produce in the month of November. As you say, the first serious engagement between the parties since Kuwait 2 years ago. It's very, very important. It's not easy. It won't be a quick or easy road, but it's a road that we must start the travel on.
Mr. Martin Griffiths, forgive me for being a nosy journalist. Do I understand now that these talks will be held before the end of the year and somewhere in like Geneva or Vienna?
You're never a nosy journalist. You're a highly professional communicator to the people of the region and Yemen. Yes, it's essential for me that these talks are held before the end of the year. I'd like to, my hope is that they will happen in November. That's soon, but my hope is they'll happen in November. I'm going to the Security Council on the 16th of November, and I hope to be able to provide the Council on that day with firm dates and progress towards making that happen securely, reasonably, and surely. And it will be in Europe, indeed.
The three confidence-building measures that you determine are the best way to go forward to build trust between the two sides, are they still the three same building measures, or have there been changes to them, which were detainee release, payment of salaries, and opening of Sana'a airport? Any progress in these three?
Yes, we've been discussing this in some detail, and we put proposals in writing in front of the government of Yemen. I have had some very good meetings with Vice President Ali Mohsen, for example, and former Prime Minister Bin Daga, and now with the new Prime Minister. So we have proposals in writing on all three. We've made progress just this week in the first one, the release of detainees and prisoners, where we have a new agreement which brings together both sides on a process for fast-tracking release of prisoners, which both sides agree is a priority and a humanitarian priority. On the airport, I'm waiting for the moment I can publicly say we'll now start the process leading to the opening of Sana'a airport, which will require certification and technical assessment, but leading to a horizon where the people in the north of Yemen will be able to travel more freely. And then, of course, on the economy, it's almost not a confidence-building measure. Payment of salaries based on a better use of currency and revenue is more than a confidence-building measure. As we can see these days, it's an essential priority. And in this one, in the last one, as reported, we want to bring representatives from Sana'a, along with the governor of the central bank, Mohammed Zamam, to a meeting as soon as possible, maybe Nairobi, maybe Berlin, it doesn't really matter where it is, to urgently address the economic issues we have been discussing today. So I'm hoping that will happen soon. I insist to the parties that this should not be a political issue. Bringing these people together is a humanitarian priority. This isn't politics. This is about the people of Yemen, and it's essential. Now, these confidence-building measures should not get in the way of my primary focus, which is on updating and renewing and engaging the parties on the framework for resolving the conflict. That's my main job, and I hope and believe and plan that in November we'll see light on that matter too, and a reconvening of consultations.
Will there be direct or indirect consultation?
I'd like to hope they should be direct. There's no substitute for people talking to each other in this business, and I've learnt this over many, many years of doing that in many, many conflicts around the world. Yemenis talking to each other is a sort of certain magic about it. They are able to communicate in ways, of course, foreigners never can. It's true in any conflict. Our business is to put these two parties together and let them talk through their differences and guide them towards areas of agreement. So ideally direct, but it needs both parties to agree. It takes two to tango. And both parties would need to agree that they're comfortable enough with each other to sit down in the same room. Obviously, that's what I would like to see happen.
I have one more question about your expected visit to Taiz province next Sunday. This area has been suffering from siege by the Houthis militias since Wednesday, the 17th of October. What do you expect to achieve by this visit?
I'm very glad you raised the issue of Taiz, and I want to go there as soon as possible. My aim in going to Taiz is really quite simple. Yemenis from all parts of the political spectrum have urged on me to focus on Taiz as a place where peace is built locally. And the parties in Taiz have been dealing with each other, have been talking about cross-line work, improving humanitarian access, corridors for the movement of people to be able to get to work across the front line. So my aim in going to Taiz, and I hope to go to Taiz and visit both sides of the conflict line, is to emphasize the great work that's been done there under the leadership of the governor and his deputies, and also with the local commanders of Ansarallah, and show that actually Yemenis can fix things, and ask them what support they need from me and from the international community. I'd like Taiz to show us what the future can bring.
Thank you, Martin Griffiths, Secretary General, Special Envoy to Yemen, for this interview. As always, you're very welcome always in Arabiya. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for the opportunity.